A dervish who enters the path of Sufism shapes his life with a divine upbringing and takes steps towards taming his soul. The expression, "the dervish does not apologize," is not a superficial display of pride or arrogance. The essence of this statement is that the dervish must first do some soul-searching and sincerely measure each of his words and actions. Therefore, the dervish checks himself before admitting a mistake and, as far as possible, avoids any behavior that would require an apology. A dervish who acts with sincerity in his words, intentions, and actions tries not to get into a situation that requires apologizing. Even if he falls into such a behavior, he makes an effort to win hearts and performs actions to get back into that heart and does what is necessary to win that heart. In the Sufi journey, it is believed that every word and every action has an echo. Dervishes express their words and intentions with deep reflection. For them, the word from the heart is essential. This is not just a superficial sincerity, but an inner truthfulness and honesty. The dervish takes responsibility for what he says and does, therefore exercises strict internal discipline to avoid misbehavior. Instead of apologizing, he owns his every word and step with righteous behavior. In the Sufi journey, dervishes have the courage to admit their mistakes. However, this acceptance aims at an internal transformation rather than an outward apology. The main purpose of the dervish is to keep his nafs under constant control, to face his mistakes and to learn from them. As an example, we can recall Mevlana's advice to a dervish: admit your own fault, fight with your ego. This is more valuable than an apology. These words represent the dervish's self-awareness and a spiritual approach to correcting his own mistakes. The story of a dervish is told like this. When a dervish realizes that he has harmed others by making a mistake, he doesn't just apologize to make amends. The most important thing for him is to repair his mistake, to mend broken hearts, and to take a hard look at himself in order not to make the same mistake again. This is a transformation of the dervish's spiritual journey through inner purification and sincerity. In Sufism, self-cultivation is at the center of the dervish's journey. Apologizing is important in a situation where the ego will not accept the mistake. However, for the dervish, apologizing is not a kind of surrender, it is having dominion over the ego. The dervish who constantly controls his nafs, ego, recognizes situations that require apology in advance and takes his steps carefully. This journey represents the dervish's progression from nafs-i emr, the commanding soul, to nafs-i mutmainah, the satisfied soul. In this progression, it is seen that every behavior, word, and thought of the dervish is shaped by a divine upbringing. The dervish who overcomes the states of the soul such as arrogance, anger, and envy, and shapes each of his behaviors with inner peace and truthfulness, avoids any situation that requires apology. In the depths of Sufism, the saying, "dervish does not apologize," refers not only to a superficial behavior, but to a deep spiritual and ethical understanding. Dervishes are people who try to shape their lives according to divine principles and aim to purify their souls. To understand this statement, we first need to elaborate on who the dervish is in Sufism, the purpose of their journey, and why they have such an approach. A dervish is a person who devotes himself to purifying his soul on the path of Sufism, reaching divine wisdom and internalizing spiritual discipline. A dervish on this path lives every moment with mindfulness, sincerely reviewing his behavior and constantly checking his intentions. Apologizing is generally associated with the acknowledgement of a mistake and a desire to make amends. However, for the dervish, apologizing is not a sign of deficiency or weakness. Rather, it aims to gain mastery over the ego and avoid the mistakes that require apology. The dervish's failure to apologize is not a sign of arrogance or stubbornness. On the contrary, it stems from the effort to take every step in accordance with divine wisdom. In Sufi literature, it is seen that dervishes question their behaviors, words, and intentions within the framework of wisdom and act accordingly. This questioning enables the dervish to first confront himself, learn from his mistakes, and correct them with spiritual maturity. For the dervish, apology is linked to an inner transformation that goes beyond recognizing and admitting one's mistakes. In the Sufi journey, recognizing mistakes and learning from them is the key to progressing on this path. A dervish takes responsibility for a mistake he has made and tries to correct it. Instead of apologizing, not repeating the mistake and mending broken hearts is the dervish's main goal. Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi advised dervishes on the path of Sufism to take every step with wisdom and to avoid the traps of the soul. Rumi's quote, "Accept your own mistake, fight with your ego. This is more valuable than an apology," summarizes this point of view in the dervish's inner journey. Dervishes first come to terms with their own souls and strive to eliminate the conditions that require apology. This inner reckoning requires constant self-control to avoid falling into apologetic behavior. As told in the story of a dervish, when a dervish realizes a mistake, instead of immediately revealing it to the outside world, he does an internal accounting. He promises himself not to repeat the mistake and tries to strengthen his spirituality so that he will never commit a similar act again. This approach is a process that increases the dervish's self-awareness and brings him closer to inner maturity. The expression "dervish does not apologize" means that the dervish first questions himself and takes precautions to avoid falling into situations that require apology. This means that the dervish frequently reviews his behavior, disciplines his ego, and stands by his every word. Through sincere introspection, dervish acknowledges his mistakes and works to correct them. Instead of apologizing, the dervish's basic approach is to make amends for the mistake and to internalize it and realize a spiritual transformation. Sufi teaching is based on forgiveness and compassion. For dervishes, however, this relationship of forgiveness and apology is an internal process of purification and transformation rather than an external ritual. Instead of apologizing to others, the dervish first admits his mistake, questions himself, and makes an effort to correct it. This effort is far more valuable and lasting than a mere verbal apology. The path of the dervish is the desire to transcend the self through an inner transformation and to approach the truth. In this journey, the aim is not to leave the world, but to confront one's essence by restraining one's ego, desires, and worldly ambitions. The dervish is a traveler who aims to find peace in his inner world against the difficulties of the world. One of the secrets of this path is that the dervish knows that everything that happens to him comes from the truth. This is why the dervish does not apologize. Because the dervish accepts accident and fate, seeks wisdom in everything that happens, and binds his heart to Allah with supreme submission. As Yunus Emre said, "Dervishhood is not a cardigan and a crown. He who makes his heart a dervish is not in need of a cardigan." These words of Yunus show that dervishhood should be lived not only with external symbols, but also with an inner purification and love. This love guides the dervish's every step and leads him to a deeper surrender. Today, when people are lost in the chaos, stress, and depression of modern life, it has become more important to embrace the peaceful aspects of Sufism. Dervishism should not only be seen as a historical heritage, but also as a guide that contributes to modern man's inner peace and search for meaning. As we delve deeper into this Sufi journey, we come to realize how helpless human beings are, yet how close they are to God. For more of my posts, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. Stay in love.